Hello, everybody. A very good evening to all of you. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar on Clinical and Public Health Research Fellowships by DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance. I hope you are all doing very well and are taking good care of yourselves and your dear ones. My name is Yukti. I'm Communications and Public Engagement Officer at DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance, and I'll be your host for today. Before we get on with the sessions, I'll quickly introduce the organization that I represent. DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance, we call it India Alliance, is a public charity registered in India that funds research in health and biomedical sciences. India Alliance invests in transformative ideas and supportive research ecosystems to advance discovery and innovation to improve health and well-being. It is funded by the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, and the Wellcome Trust, United Kingdom. Apart from funding research, we fund various programs that promote national and international collaborations, workshops for professional skill building and capacity building, and interventions to strengthen the Indian research ecosystem. We are also committed to making science more accessible by facilitating various public engagement activities in India. To help all of us better navigate the console and participate more actively in the webinar, I'll share a few housekeeping rules with all of you. Video and microphone of the attendees will remain switched off during the webinar, but please leave your questions for the speakers anytime during the webinar in the questions box. During the webinar, we will be launching a few polls that will be flashed on your screen. So please do participate in the poll to help our speakers get a better understanding of the audience. Webinar is currently being recorded, and in case the webinar ends abruptly due to any technical glitch, please join back using the same joining link that you have just used. And if you plan to share any highlights from the webinar on social media, please do feel free to tag us. Here are some of the social media handles of India Alliance. And I'll quickly share the agenda of today's program. We have the following sessions planned for this event. In session 1, we'll be discussing about the remit mandate, eligibility requirements, and more about the clinical and public health research fellowships. This will be followed by a session from the chair of CPH committee, Professor Shah Ebrahim, who has agreed to join us for the session today. Shah will be shedding light on the critical elements of a competitive grants committee's expectations, do's and don'ts for the applicants. This will be followed by India Alliance's Fellows perspective. The session will be delivered by Dr. Shantala Hegde. She is the CPH Intermediate Fellow at NIMHANS-Bengaluru. And finally, we'll open the forum for Q&A. Before we start the session, we'll request you to please do cast your vote for this poll that I'll currently being launching. This will help us get a better understanding of our audience. Thank you everyone. So we do see we have a mix of all the categories, and we'll make sure that we try to modulate our vocabulary accordingly. So without much ado, I would like to invite my colleague, Dr. Maheshwar Reddy Gumla from the grants team to take us through India Alliance's Clinical and Public Health Research Fellowship in the light of its remit, eligibility, provision, requirements, and application forms. I'll quickly give you a brief introduction of Mahesh. Mahesh completed his doctorate in the field of cell molecular biology and genetics from University of Geneva, Switzerland. After earning his doctorate, he did 2 stints of postdoc at University Medicine Göttingen, George August University, Germany, and New York University at Abu Dhabi, UAE. He has been working as grants advisor at India Alliance since July 2019. And with that, I would like to invite Dr. Maheshwar. Over to you, Mahesh.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the introduction, Yukti. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Mahesh, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on Clinical and Public Health Research Fellowship. As many of you may be aware, the call is presently open and preliminary applications are being accepted for the ongoing round. So during this presentation, I will be talking about the mandate of the fellowship scheme, the provisions, key policies, and I will also take you through the application process. So the remit of India Alliance is to support biomedical research that is relevant to human and animal welfare. So the proposed research should fall within the India Alliance remit. So for this particular scheme, it encompasses the full spectrum of biomedical science involving clinical and public health research. If you are not sure about the remit of your proposed research, please feel free to write to us with your CV as well as a 200-word summary of your proposed research at this following email ID, and we will get back to you. So the eligibility for this scheme is -1 to 15 years post MD, MS, MPH or equivalent. So this competition is open for applicants in the final year of the MD, MS, MPH or up to 15 years post MD, MS or MPH or equivalent clinical and public health research experience. So in order to apply to this scheme, the clinicians and public health researchers do not require a PhD, and there are also no age or nationality restrictions. But the candidate needs to be a resident in India while applying. The candidate need not be resident in India while applying, but should be willing to establish an independent research career in India. So applications to the CPH fellowship competition are accepted under the following three categories, that is early career fellowship, intermediate fellowship and senior fellowship. So for the early career fellowship, it's for applicants who are starting their independent research career but require a fellowship supervisor to acquire skills, training, resources, and in order to complete their project. So the intermediate fellowship is suitable for applicants who are newly established or in the process of establishing themselves as independent investigators. And the senior fellowship is suitable for applicants who have established themselves as independent investigators and who would now like to lead a larger program of research. So applicants are advised to choose the most appropriate scheme suitable for them based on their qualification, research experience, career trajectory, and track record. So the typical life cycle of an India Alliance fellowship is it starts off with a preliminary application and it ends with a fellowship award. So this whole process takes about 10 months time. So applicants should kindly bear this in mind. So here are some of the key policies and conditions with regarding to the applications of this particular scheme. So one of the very important policy is a resubmission policy. So regardless of previous applications to India Alliance, all applicants have to make a preliminary application to every competition. So in case the applicant is not shortlisted at the preliminary application stage, the applicant may apply to the same scheme subject to meeting the eligibility criteria for that particular scheme. And also kindly note that normally resubmission of after consideration of a full application is not permitted in any scheme. And another important policy of our clinical and public health fellowship scheme is the dual fellowship policy. That is, one may apply even if he or she already holds another fellowship. However, please note that if awarded, the applicant will be required to make a choice between the current fellowship and the India Alliance fellowship. And the other important policy is about salaried appointments. So applicant may or may not have a salaried appointment at the host institute while applying, but in case of an award, the applicant cannot have a salaried appointment other than the one at the host institute. And also we have a policy on plagiarism. So as per this policy, India Alliance actively checks applications for plagiarism, including self-plagiarism. using state-of-the-art publishing tools. So applicants are advised to avoid copying sentences and paragraphs from different published sources, including their own publications, and carefully check their applications before submissions. So this time commitment aspect comes into only during the full application stage. However, India Alliance expects its fellows to spend majority of the time on research, with any non-research activities such as teaching, administration, or other institutional responsibilities not normally exceeding like 2 hours for early career or 8 hours for intermediate and senior fellowships. So here in this slide, you will see the key provisions of this clinical and public health fellowships. So this fellowship is for a 5-year duration, and one cannot ask for a lesser duration. And interested clinicians have the clinicians and public health researchers have the opportunity to pursue their research goals alongside their clinical duties. So as I already told you about the eligibility and the duration, there is also a competitive personal support. So India Alliance recognizes that clinicians, public health researchers have to put in substantial efforts to pursue their interest in research along with other clinical responsibilities. Hence, India Alliance therefore offers generous personal support to incentivize their efforts. And also there is generous research support with the flexibility to accommodate requirements of clinical and public health research, including support for equipment and consumables. There is also flexibility to request for support staff. And also kindly bear in mind that for requests for additional research staffs may be considered if the proposed work involves field work or if the clinical studies require assistance from additional support staff. And there is also funds for overseas travel to carry out research outside host institute or work outside host institute. And in this particular scheme, there is also opportunity to pursue a PhD on an India Alliance funded research. So these are the roles on the application. So these are the mandatory roles which needs to be present at the prelim stage of the application. That is the lead applicant, and then there is this for the early career fellowship, the role of fellowship supervisor is also mandatory. And apart from that, there needs to be one additional letter of recommendation which needs to be provided by a supervisor. So this additional letter of recommendation is required for all 3 fellowships, that is early, intermediate, and senior. So the role of the sponsor is optional at this preliminary application. However, one should have identified a sponsor and there should be a mention about the sponsor. So, but a letter from the sponsor is not mandatory at this particular stage. And for further information about roles on the application, please kindly go through this following site. So now I will talk about the application process. So India Alliance uses the India Alliance Online Grants Management System, which we also call it as ISS. So in order to complete a preliminary application, kindly use our online system, that is ISS, and please also refer to the ISS user guidelines for completion of your application and also the submission process. Please ensure that the form is submitted by the published deadline. And every user needs to create an account. And for existing users, please kindly log in and access your account. And new users, please register with us to create your account. And please ensure that this address is valid and regularly checked. And also kindly bear in mind that this is an online system. So all the applications which are received online and the submission also requires the participation of the applicant as well as other participants on the application, such as sponsor, fellowship supervisor, etc. So once you create your login and once you log in and create the application under the required category, that is early, intermediate, or senior, you will observe a dashboard with the contents of the form, as you see on the left hand side of the screen. So these will be the contents which one the applicant needs to fill in. So you will have contents such as project summary, host institution details, which I will go through in the coming few slides. So these are all the essentials of a preliminary application. So the most essential aspect is the project summary. So a research proposal needs to be submitted, and that seeks to answer an original research question related to clinical and public health research. There needs to be a project title, and please kindly make sure that you do not use acronyms in your project title, and wherever there is use of acronyms, kindly expand it. And also in the prelim stage, the research summary, there's a word limit of 750 words. And to sufficiently substantiate your research summary, you also have a provision to include the necessary references. Kindly also take care of the formatting and the language. And as I already mentioned to you earlier, kindly make sure that there is no plagiarism. And the other contents of this application is you need to enter the details about the host institute. This is also mandatory. So a host institute should be a not-for-profit host institute in India that will administer the fellowship for the full duration of the award. And however, and as I already mentioned, a salaried position or commitment to a salaried position at the host institute is not required. And apart from the name of the host institute, there will be also a section where you need to enter the department where you are going to perform your proposed research, and also the city. And there is also a section in the application where you need to justify why you have chosen this institution. And also you also need to justify what is the support you expect to receive from the institution. And as I already told you, the sponsor details, it's optional, and you need to fill in the relevant details. Like if you have identified a sponsor, please fill in the necessary details. You need to enter the name, designation, organization, department, city. And if you haven't yet identified the sponsor, kindly you need to mention the reason for not having identified the sponsor till date. So these are the letters of recommendation which are mandatory at the prelim application stage. So as I already told you, for the early career fellowship, it is the fellowship supervisor. A letter from the fellowship supervisor is a mandatory. And during these details, please kindly add the details of the individual who will provide recommendation letter towards your application, which includes name, organization, department, country, and the title of his post. And just a second. So mentor is optional at the prelim stage. So if you have identified a mentor, you can add the respective details, or if you haven't identified, it's not an issue. So in the applicant details section, one needs to fill in all the relevant information which involves the complete contact information of the applicant. And there's also a section where the applicant needs to fill in his highest qualifying degree. And so when the applicant mentions the qualifying degree, they can mention the viva date of the qualifying degree. This is not the date on which you received your degree. It can also be the viva date of your qualifying degree. And the applicant also needs to fill in the details about the present status at the host institute, such as if the applicant already holds a faculty position at the host institute, or if he's a postdoc at the host institute, or if he's being considered for a faculty position at the host institute. And if he doesn't have a faculty position at the host institute, he can also make a mention about it in the applicant details section. And then there is the applicant CV section, wherein the applicant needs to provide all the details about his education, previous posts held, and as well as his qualifying degrees. So, and in this section, and an applicant can also make a mention about career breaks. So a due consideration is given to periods of non-research activity, or which we also call non-research career breaks, when applicants are not involved in any type of research activity. So one can provide details about such career breaks with due justification, and the office will give due consideration to these periods. And one can also provide the names of the past supervisors, and in this applicant CV section, the applicant also has to enter the details about his publications, with the most recent ones being listed on top, and kindly use uniform referencing style, and also include all the names of the authors, and underline the first author, and also use asterisks for the where the applicant is the corresponding author. And also please include the Google's Scholar profile in this section. And also you can there is a section where you can fill in details about your scientific career till date, and also reason for applying for this particular fellowship. And there is another section in this application wherein applicant needs to fill about any other ongoing grants or fellowship application which the applicant may have. So the applicant can fill in if this is the first application to the India Alliance or no, and if there is any ongoing grant or fellowship, the applicant needs to attach 200-word abstract with specific aims and giving the role, and also providing any overlap of this of the grant with this India Alliance proposal. And you also there is also a section where the applicant needs to fill if there is any other ongoing grant application in progress. So kindly note that the submission deadline is 16th March 2 p.m. IST, and kindly make sure that all the roles on the applications are duly filled in, and please don't try to push to submit the application until the deadline, that is the 16th. It's advisable to submit the application even earlier. So kindly make a note of this submission deadline, that is 16th March 2021, 2 p.m. Indian Standard Time. And for further information, please kindly go through our these following websites and social media. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mahesh. That was a very comprehensive presentation. Thanks a lot. I would request our participants to please drop their questions in the questions box, and we will be taking them up after the next two talks. So for the next session, it's my pleasure to invite Professor Shah Ebrahim, who is the chair of Clinical and Public Health Research Committee. Shah will be shedding light on the critical elements of competitive grants. We'll talk about committees, expectations, common do's and don'ts for the applicants. Although he does not need much of an introduction, but I'll quickly share his background with all of you. Shah studied medicine at Nottingham University, including an intercalated degree in community medicine, and obtained an master's in science in epidemiology from London School of Health and Tropical Medicine, and a doctorate of medicine holding a Wellcome Trust Fellowship in clinical epidemiology. Shah is trained in primary care and subsequently is a geriatric medicine in geriatric medicine, and have held chairs in geriatric medicine, clinical epidemiology, and epidemiology of aging. He chaired the Wellcome Trust Populations and Public Health Funding Committees. In 2008, Shah moved to New Delhi following awards of Wellcome Trust grants to work with PHFI, Public Health Foundation of India, to build capacity and for public health activities, and to establish a South Asia network for chronic disease research. He is a member of Joint Global Health Trials Funding Committee, and of course the chair of DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance Clinical and Public Health Fellowship Committee. On that note, I would like to invite Professor Shah Ebrahim. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Uti. You're going to do the slides for me, aren't you? Or not?
Yes, we'll make you the presenter.
Okay, well, let's get the first slide up. It's very nice to be here and talking to so many of you. It's a pity I can't actually see you face to face, but these are the days that we live in. So if we get the first slide up, I can't actually see it. Is it ready?
We can see your screen, Shah. You need to go to the presentation.
Ah, okay. So where is that?
I can see it's in the PDF form. You need to simply click on the PDF icon right at the bottom.
I'm sorry about this. I share the screen. Okay. Well, this is a bit of a mess, isn't it? Where should I? Have you got my PowerPoint or?
I'll share it from my end. I'll just share it from my end.
Okay, I thought you were doing that. Sorry about this.
Can you see the screen, Shah?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Great.
Great. Yeah.
Okay. And can you move them on for me, or do I move them on?
You simply need to tell me to move to the next slide, and I'll do that.
Next slide, then. I think the first thing about writing a grant is you really need to read the small print. So if we could move to the first slide, please. The India Alliance website is very clean, but behind all this cleanness is the small print that you really need to be reading before you get started. Next slide. It's really important to start early. It takes at least 3 months and probably 6 months to write a good application. So review the India Alliance timelines, and it's very important to think, are you in the best place for the research you want to do? Have you got a supervisor, a mentor and collaborators in place? And you need to think about improving your ideas from the first idea you had for doing your research. The important way of doing this is to get feedback, and you need to get feedback from within and outside of your discipline. It's very easy to be in a discipline bubble where everybody agrees with the same ways of doing things. It's only if you go to outside of your discipline that people will say, hey, there are other ways of looking at this. The India Alliance office is incredibly supportive, so make sure you make good use of them. And don't forget that your own institutional research office will need to approve your application, and it's good to talk to them very early on in the piece. Okay, next slide, please. Applying for a fellowship is a bit like climbing Everest. You don't do it alone. You get help wherever you can get it, and it's a process. And you've heard what the process is like. So let's move on to the next slide. It's very tempting to put all your energy into writing about the research project, but these are the 23 sections for a full proposal, and they're all there for a reason, and failure to actually look at them properly and fill them in properly can be a big problem. Next slide, please. Now, the essential messages you're trying to get across to people like me and the committee and your reviewers is, who are you? What's your career trajectory? Why are you doing it now? You know, if you've just done your PhD, is it the best time to apply for an early career fellowship? You've got to think about the science and how doing the science that you're proposing to do will help you in your career. It's no good doing a project that is your supervisor's project. It'll help your supervisor, but may not help you. And then you really need to think about the place. Is it the best place for you, the best place for the science, or is it just because you happen to be there? Happening to be there is not a good way of choosing the place you should do your science in. And again, your supervisor and mentor, are they the right people for you? This is going to be a 5-year relationship, and it is important that you can get along together. The science, is it actually doable? And in general, keep it simple, review the literature, brainstorm about what needs to be done. And the third thing is the impact. Could this research in the world make things better? Okay, next slide, please. What are the committee looking for? Your caliber. And your caliber is very much dependent on your career trajectory and why is it right for you to now have a fellowship. The scientific merit of the proposed project, the significance of the research, and the suitability of your supervisor, mentor, and the place you're doing it. So we're looking at those things primarily. Next slide, please. So what do you need to do? You've got to get a good research question. And unfortunately, doing research that was done in the USA to see if you get the same answer in India is not a very good idea. The likelihood is you'll get the same answer, so think harder. It's good to be able to explain why your idea is good, and I think it's very interesting to see how many people can explain what they want to do to an intelligent 9-year-old. If you can't get a 9-year-old to get what you're trying to do, you probably haven't got it worked out enough in your own head. So you have to work out what you need to do to answer your question, the objectives. You need to work out how you will know whether you've got the answer right. That's your hypothesis. And you need to use a study design that is capable of answering the question. They will need to tie up together. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, it's very tempting just to take the summary from the preliminary application, but it is actually the most important bit. So look at it carefully, write it initially, and then rewrite it when you've finished writing the full proposal. Remember, a lot of people are just going to look at the summary because the committee has a lot of paperwork, and there are people who are going to lead on your application, and other people will not necessarily have read the whole application. Review the literature. Systematic reviews are particularly important and are not often included in applications to India Alliance. So look at them to see what the literature is saying and try and work out where your research idea fits in. Make sure that your what, whys, and hows are coherent, and think about what's novel about it. Why are you doing it? The hypotheses, I've seen so many hypotheses that are simply not testable, so make sure that the hypothesis is properly stated. And then how many participants? It's very rare that people think hard about participants in animal experiments, but it's just as important as in human experiments. Think about how the data will be collected and how is it going to be analyzed. Next slide, please. Training. These are fellowships that are helping you to develop your career. And I've said a few times now, are you in the best place for your career development? What will you learn from the research you want to do? And what skills are you going to need to do the research? And where are you going to get these skills? Particularly, for example, you're wanting to go overseas. What skills are you going to get and how are you going to acquire them? And think to yourself, how will this fellowship actually help my career develop? The working outside the host institution, again, you need to explain why and how it will help. Next slide, please. Now you're writing for the interview panel and reviewers. You're not writing for a scientific journal, and most of the panel will not be expert in your research field. But they've all got great general knowledge and they are very clever people. And they're often up to date if your topic of research is important and they keep up on topical issues. And many of them will actually look for reviews in your topic area. Panel members are busy people, and if you have to read a sentence more than once, you should rewrite it because the flow of the writing will help the reader very much. Next slide, please. Figures help explain complex things, and they're not used enough because people want to use the paper to write more words. A figure may get across 1,000 words, but don't use microfonts, don't make the margins tiny, don't exceed word and page limits, don't add 50 pages of appendices, don't use acronyms and jargon, and don't try and cite every reference on the topic. None of that improves your chances. And just press again. Slide, please. This is my favorite acronym. The FVHWs and the CHNs will work for the RDC and will collect data on MACE and interview relatives using a standard VA. These sentences really irritate reviewers and committee members, and there's a prize for anybody who can decode those acronyms in that sentence. Next slide, please. Okay, our mountaineering analogy. I'm now going to talk a bit about the interview and your presentation. And the interview needs as much practice as you can get. Mostly the interview panel are trying to help you do your best. They're not trying to help you fall down a hole, but it's very easy to fall down holes if you're not well prepared. Next slide, please. So practice. Write down what you want to say and memorize it. Don't read from a script. And particularly if you're doing your presentation, as people are having to do now virtually, it's very tempting to read from a script and it just goes too fast and it's not easy to understand. Keep calm is easy to say, but the more times you practice it, the calmer you'll feel. For the questions, listen to the question and check if you don't understand it. Don't try and talk on something that may be completely not what the question was about. Don't deviate, and do keep it short because people like to ask several questions, and if you take 5 minutes replying to the first one, it's wasting time. So practice and practice more. Next slide. You have 7 slides, and that's not 7 times 4 slides. Many people have got into this habit of putting 4 slides together on a single slide, and again, it doesn't help. You need to be specific about what you want to talk about and do not overload the slides. Next slide. Okay, I'm coming to some common problems. Overambitious proposals that try and look at the burden of a condition, its determinants, the prevention and the control of it. You need to be more focused. Armchair thinking. I had a proposal where somebody wanted to put an MRI scanner in rural Bihar, and they talked about the extra security that would be needed, but any proper thinking would realize that this isn't going to be feasible. Inadequate experience in the team. Qualitative studies with no qualitative research or collaborator. It's really disheartening to find that it's already been done. And if you didn't check and didn't do a decent literature survey, you won't find that out. And often the reviewers and the committee members do find it out, and it's not a good place to be in the interview. Letters of support. Some people, some supervisors and sponsors and mentors provide good letters of support. Others just copy and paste what they've put in for people before. It needs to be specific to you, and you need to have a good relationship with your supervisor, your sponsor, and your mentor to get sure that you get a good letter of support that is about you and about your aspirations and your research. Next slide. If you've got more than 3 research questions, you need to start again and be parsimonious with the number. 3 is ample. It's quite easy to make questions that fit data that are available, and that's not a good way around. Many proposals have no sample size estimates or estimates for the wrong hypotheses. and the temptation to provide us with unusual study designs. We've had prospective case control studies, cluster randomized step wedge designs. These may be feasible to talk about, but they are unclear and often the wrong design. Many people write there are no ethical considerations. Virtually every bit of research has ethical considerations. You have to think about them and work out how you're going to handle them. Next slide. Yet more common problems. Trying to hide flaws in the design, adding complex, expensive extra measures that are of limited relevance to the main question. This is very common if you've got a supervisor who's interested in mechanisms and you're interested in looking at the outcomes of an intervention. Bolting in lots of biochemistry, DNA assays, RNA assays is not a good idea. Failing to explain where controls come from. We usually learn a lot about the people who have got the disease or the condition that you're studying, and then a throwaway sentence saying, we'll get some controls. It's important to say where they're going to come from, how you're going to get them. A lot of research comes to us with no controls, whereas most research does require some sort of comparison group. Sadly, some institutional environments lack the equipment and support staff that are going to be needed, and you end up putting the equipment and support staff in your fellowship application. Again, this speaks to, is this institution the best place to be working in if it doesn't have the key equipment and support to do the work you want to do? I fear that many supervisors and mentors have not read applications critically. And the quality of the application, I think, is much improved if your supervisor has critically read what you've proposed to put in. Next slide, please. And even more common problems. Weak justification of budgets, particularly for the overseas bit. Very tokenistic capacity building, public participation, dissemination of findings, no link to relevant Indian and other agencies that should be involved in certainly the dissemination and participation parts of the research. Not reading the guidance notes for applicants or discussing your application within the India Alliance staff. And of course, the rookie mistake of losing the file when your computer crashes and you haven't backed it all up. Next slide, please. Now, there are fatal flaws. In a committee, we try and accommodate things that are not quite right, but the ambition experience mismatch, where you've just finished your PhD and you are going to study 2 million people, genotype the lot of them, and do a whole load of stuff. This is a mismatch between what your ambition is and your experience. The design proposed will not answer the question posed. You're going to do a case control study, but what you really want to know about is prognosis, which has a time element to it. Inability to control for biases and confounding factors. So, non-randomized evaluations, not masking outcome assessments, selecting highly different participants to what people see in clinical practice. These are problems that can't really be overcome. Failure to discuss and cite relevant previous work, and work that is going to be internally valid but won't actually make a difference in the wider world. It's not generalizable. Okay, next slide, please. More fatal flaws. A fishing expedition. You've measured 200 different variables, there's no clear hypothesis, and you are looking for something that you don't really know what it is. That isn't going to work. You've not worked on this, the team hasn't worked on this area, the institution has never worked on it, that's not going to work. Arrogant applications, we had one where the applicant was supported by the past, present and future presidents of the society of the disease in question. That doesn't help. Complex designs, multiple data sources, multi-country centres, all have problems with them and can be fatal flaws. Finally, dismissing previous research as poorly conducted, uninformative, irrelevant, it's very likely that it's been conducted by someone who's been asked to review your paper. So bear that in mind when you make dismissive statements about other research. Next slide, please. Now, some solutions. Get the best supervisor and collaborators you can find. And it won't necessarily be the person who was your PhD supervisor. Most research needs other disciplines, not just yours. Just think about the co-disciplinarity that could make your research much more rich. Make time to brainstorm with collaborators at the start. Don't keep your brilliant idea to yourself until the last day when you're trying to write it up onto the proposal. Again, talk to the India Alliance people and let your admin finance people know when the application will be coming their way for approval. Keep in touch with them. Next slide, please. More solutions. Who are you going to get to help you write the application? Make sure you've got the help in hand. Read successful grant applications. What makes them successful? Draft the structure of your proposal first and get feedback so that you will be writing to a structure rather than having written 50 pages of dense text. Get your friends to read your proposal at the early draft stage and again at the end. Get your supervisor and mentor and an expert in the field to comment well before it goes into the India Alliance. This will give you time to do revisions, hone your proposal. Next slide, please. Even more solutions. Make time to write the application. We all lead busy lives. 6 o'clock in the morning may be the best place and time for you. In the evening may be the best place, but make a time in your diary for do the writing. If it's getting complicated, stop and ask, why is it getting complicated? And that often unblocks the complication. If it's too long, stop and ask, are you trying to do too much? Read the latest reviews on the topic. Are your ideas on target or not? If they aren't, is this a good thing or is it actually a bad thing? And go on a course. Next slide. So we move from the interview and success. And obviously that's what we're hoping those of you who get through the preliminaries will be successful. Next slide, please. So just to summarize, the research and training environment has to be optimal for the fellowship. We want a clear, worthwhile research question that's doable within your expertise and within the time frame. We like to see the infrastructure for research and training in place. Limitations, there's always limitations to any study design, any research, and these need to be acknowledged. How robust will the likely findings be? What sort of possible impacts are discussed? And you must provide the non-scientific details required by India Alliance properly. And ultimately, if the research makes the reviewers wish that they had thought of the idea themselves and had had this opportunity in their careers, that is all we could really want for. Next slide, please. So, and if at first you don't succeed, try again. Unfortunately, with the India Alliance, your failure after the full stage won't be a try again for India Alliance, but there are many other funding organizations that can be gone to. So thank you very much indeed for listening to what I've been trying to get across to you, and I hope it helps you in getting a good proposal in. And I'm looking forward to seeing the next bunch of stuff come through. Thank you. Okay, that's me out.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Professor Shah. That was a very, very insightful and helpful presentation. We hope that all our attendees would have really benefited from that talk. Thanks a lot. Okay, without much ado, I would like to now invite our next speaker, Dr. Shantala Hegde, who is a CPH Intermediate Fellow, currently working as an Associate Professor and Consultant in Clinical Neuropsychology and Cognitive Neuroscience Center, and is the faculty in charge of the Music Cognition Laboratory, Department of Clinical Psychology at NIMHANS, National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bengaluru. Shantala completed her Masters of Philosophy and PhD in Clinical Psychology with NIMHANS-Bengaluru. She is a musician by interest and passion. While working as a Senior Scientific Officer at NIMHANS, she started carrying out systematic research work in the area of music and cognition and neuromusicology. She worked really hard towards establishing the Music Cognition Laboratory at NIMHANS, which is the first of its kind in the country. And she underwent a training program in neurologic music therapy and became an affiliate professional member of the Academy of Neurologic Music Therapy under the guidance of Dr. Michael Thought at the University of Toronto, Canada. Today, she will be sharing her journey as an India Alliance Fellow and also how the Intermediate Fellowship helped her pursue her interest to bring together the two areas of her interest, which was music and psychology. So on that note, I would like to invite Shantala. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I'll just share my screen. I hope it's visible now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Many thanks to India Alliance, DBT Wellcome Trust for giving me this opportunity to share my experience and my journey to CPH Intermediate Fellowship. And the previous speaker, Dr. Shah Ebrahim, has already stressed upon several important points. But from a personal experience, when I started even thinking about applying for the CPH Intermediate Fellowship, as mentioned earlier, I had started working in the area of music and neuroscience, bringing the two fields together. And I was at NIMHANS already, which is currently my host institute as well. And I was fortunate enough to be a faculty member. And by the time I thought of applying for the fellowship, I had started having this lab space where we could carry out the music cognition lab. And today, I must thank the fellowship for majorly funding this lab and helping me take my area of research and my passion forward. But perhaps like many in the audience right now, I too had a point where I was wondering, should I apply or not apply? There were several thoughts, doubts, concerns. I wondered, what is this CPH Intermediate Fellowship and what are the different types of fellowships that are offered by the India Alliance DBT Wellcome Trust. I also wondered, am I eligible to apply for the fellowship, and if so, which one? Because now, as the previous speaker has already mentioned, Dr. Ebrahim, about the early career and the intermediate and so on and so forth. I also thought about, great deal, is this the right time to apply for the fellowship? I had just become a faculty and I was trying to bring this lab. So I was in this juncture where I wanted a grant, a path forward to take research forward in this field. I also thought about, will it help me taking my overall research interest forward, and what about my career? At this point, I am doing this kind of studies. I had just started working on looking at music and emotion, music and cognition in certain medical conditions. So I was thinking, how will this particular research proposal, which I would submit to India Alliance, help me take this forward? Do I have the required skill set to go ahead and apply for this fellowship? So perhaps when you listen to Professor Ebrahim wonder, there's so many qualifications, the CV, having a mentor, to do a lot of homework. And there were times when I wondered, do I have the required skill set? Am I the right person? Because if you fail at a later application process, you cannot apply to the Wellcome Trust again. But what were the steps that I took? First thing I did was to connect and discuss with other recipients of this fellowship. And I was fortunate enough to have the senior fellow funded by the same in India Alliance DBT Wellcome, Dr. Venkat Subramaniam, who is my collaborator currently and with whom I had worked earlier. And I got immense help and guidance from him. Sometimes I would like to even acknowledge, and I have shared it with him, that he had more confidence in me than I did myself at that point in time. It's important to connect. So I had another colleague who had received the intermediate fellowship. I spoke to him a great deal to know how was it, how much time frame is it required, what career juncture that they were at when they applied for the fellowship. I went through the India Alliance website thoroughly, and I would urge each and every individual who is in the audience who would wish to apply to please go through the India Alliance website thoroughly. Every bit of information is given, and in case you have doubt, the team members are always there to help you. If you write to them, you get a prompt response. I was also inspired by reading the fellows page. If you go to the website, there are fellows page. You could get a glimpse of the kind of research work, the varied kind of research work that's being funded by this great trust. And in fact, that inspired me. It's almost like, you know, I started dreaming that I should have a page like this, and, you know, my work should get recognized, and it's more like you're so passionate about your work and then you want it to grow further. So what I did was to overcome this doubt whether I'm at the right, what are my skill sets, and am I at the right juncture, I made a list of my personal strengths and weaknesses. Trust me, we all have our own lacunas or challenges. We may not have many publications at some point, or we may not have had research projects, or for various reasons. So it's better to make a list of your personal strengths, weaknesses, and look into the eligibility to apply for the fellowship. So that's how I overcame my self-doubt. I dedicated a great deal of time to zero in on the specific research topic or the research question. I think that was perhaps the key thing, because you may have so many ideas. You may have you may be already doing a couple of research projects depending on which time point you are at in your career, but it's very, very important to ask a very key question and zero in on that research question. So a lot of time is required for that, and I cannot reiterate the importance of discussing with your peers, your other research collaborators, or your colleagues who are working in that area. And I would say it's very, very important to visualize and see yourself where you'll be 5 to 10 years down the lane. So that's how, as a clinician researcher especially, you have other responsibilities as well. But where do you see yourself and your research work contributing to the field? That visualizing where you would be, I think, adds on to your passion, and that's what reflects in the work that you do, and including your application. So just key thing, connect with other fellows, go through the details in the website. It's undoubtedly a great fellowship to pursue or take your research interest forward. The kind of support you get is immense. Dedicate time to choose the right research question and remove self-doubt. So all outstanding work is in art as well as science results from immense zeal applied to great ideas. So don't let go of that passion. Now, preparing to the application and for the review process, again, you go through some self-doubts and thoughts and concerns. I put them down. So my doubt was, how do I begin with the application process and where to begin from? What's the timeline and different levels of selection process? So you have the preliminary, then you have the full proposal, then you have the reviewers' comments coming in, and then finally the interview. So there are different phases. It's important that you start preparing in different formats, so the short length or the full proposal. But I would say give enough time that you already have the full proposal in mind. You just have to make an abstract for your short proposal and improvise further as you go ahead. The process seemed quite different from other funding agencies that I was familiar with until then. And I was also fearful, what if my application doesn't go through the full process? What if I fail? So these doubts do come at some point in time. What did I do? I went to the website, I downloaded the forms, I connected to the other fellows, sought as much help as possible, and luckily, I mean, I consider myself fortunate to have colleagues like Venkat or Dr. Shivram who helped me get an idea, and that also helped me a lot. Keep all the information required ready. Select who the mentor should be, with which host institute that you're going to work with. It's very, very important to see the match between your research question and the host institution and the mentor you want to work with. If there is a person in your field that you're working and you know that this person, perhaps you might have interacted with them or been in touch with them, it's important to consider all those factors to choose your mentor. In my case, I had interacted with Dr. Schlog almost 10 years before I applied for this fellowship, and we in fact had written Indo-US project that didn't come through, but I was always in touch. I even visited his lab before. So already I had made a connection with my mentor, and I knew he would be the right person to guide me through with this research question that I'm asking. And if you're a clinician researcher, it's also important to look at if your mentor is also a clinician, thereby they'll understand the challenges that you might be going through. Please mark in your calendar, dedicate enough time for the application. It requires a lot of time. In fact, I had to take off from work. I took my vacation to work on the application. So I missed 2 of my vacations that year just to work on this application. But the results you reap is always wonderful. So it's okay to let go of your vacation for a year. Decide who will be your collaborators and mentors, supervisor and the host institution, as I mentioned, and fill in the forms and the required information carefully. I made some errors, spelling mistakes, and that was also picked up, and I felt quite embarrassed that I should have paid more attention, but nevertheless, please, others don't have to do the mistakes I did. Think positive and take different levels of review process as part of learning experience, and that's how I overcame this fear of what if I fail. That's okay, but the beauty of the India Alliance DBT Welcome Fellowships is that every step is like your learning experience, and you hone your skills. So it's in your journey to be a good researcher, all these experiences count. And I would say, please watch the videos on the website. They are very helpful. What I did was go through each videos carefully, made important points, and that helped me prepare for the interview. So key point, zero in on the research question, decide upon the team you're working with, choose the mentor carefully, keep enough time. Different levels of review process selection is part of the learning experience, and do watch the videos. So have no fear of perfection, because you'll never reach it. So there'll always be some lacuna, there'll always be some errors, but that's okay. The process is on. Now, how do I prepare for the interview? Again, there were several doubts. Who's who in the field will be in the interview? As Dr. Ebrahim already mentioned, they may not be directly from your field, but they are experts. So they have gone through your application carefully. So you just can't make fool of yourself or just say things that just comes to your head offhand and try to answer the questions in the interview. How effectively to present my research proposal in that 5 minutes. It's very, very crucial that you prepare well for that 5-minute presentation. Will the interview be intimidating? How should I mentally prepare for that? And will I be able to convince the panel? Will I succeed? Another question that would come. What did I do? I first congratulated myself for being selected till the interview, because I felt, okay, wow, my application has crossed this and I'm going to face the panel. And I felt thrilled because I was so interested to go and present my research idea. And then I thought, it's okay even if I don't get it at the end, but let me do my best. So you prepare your best and just forget about the outcome at that point in time. Timing is very, very crucial. Please time that 5-minute presentation. I think key points that Dr. Ebrahim already mentioned, don't crowd your slides. Make those points that you want to present about your proposal very, very carefully, and make sure you give that take-home message of the entire research proposal in those 5 minutes. So I even rehearsed it so many times. I presented it in front of my peer group and shared my slides to my team members, made sure that they understood what I'm trying to present during that 5-minute as well as in the proposal. You should be able to convey the key points, as I said, and prepare well to respond point-wise. So 10 to 15 days before the interview, you do get the comments from the reviewers, and do go through it carefully, point by point, and be prepared mentally to answer. And keep your points very succinct, simple, and clear. So you should be ready to answer a question in the interview from a highly technical point of view to a very simple basic question as though you're going to answer to a lay public person about your research question. So you need to have that bandwidth and understanding of your research field and the study specific that you have taken up to be able to share these points. The most important thing is be genuine and honest. If you're so honest with your research question, you know your limitations, you know your strengths, and just be yourself. If you're so passionate about the work you're going to do, it just comes out. You can't hide that. And practice is the key. And what helped me was visualize. I visualized being in that interview room. The details of the committee members are on the website, so go through. Even though you don't have to know each and every person in the committee personally, but you have their CV, their affiliation, so you can also anticipate what kind of questions they might ask you from their perspective. So if it's an epidemiologist, or if it's a person from public health, or if there's a person from neuroscience, what kind of questions that person might ask about your research questions. So you need to visualize, and that kind of helps. So stay positive, be yourself, be genuine. Practice is the key. There's no shortcut to it. Your passion for research matters the most. So that's what I say. That let's assume you don't get the funding, but it is like, I want to do this research study irrespective of whether I get the funding or not. So this is my area. This is what I want to do. That kind of passion should be there. And be thorough with the technical aspects of your research proposal, research area in general. So thorough review of literature and the subject. And once again, see the videos. These are very helpful. There are other fellows speaking about their experience, and that's very, very helpful. So in order to succeed, your desire to succeed should be greater than your fear of failure. So don't worry about failure, worry about the success. Working with the team, I think the members in the committee, the reviewers are basically great mentors. This has been my experience. Even in the interview, the questions they ask is basically to showcase your talent. They ask questions that make you feel comfortable. It's not intimidating. It's basically questions that make you think. It gives you a chance to showcase your talent and your interest. And they're all great mentors. Even during the first year review period, they pair you up with a senior expert or committee reviewer, and they're just there to help you. So any challenges you share with them, they're basically want you to succeed. They want you to do well. These fellowships are highly competitive, of course, one of the most coveted ones, but you know, the team or the entire team never gives you an opportunity to make you feel that you're competing with somebody else. You're basically competing with your own self. Even during the interview, you never get to see who are the other members who are going to be part of the interview, or who are the other fellows or applicants. But basically, they create an environment that makes you feel like, oh, I have to improve from this step to another step. So that's the kind of environment I feel that India Alliance DBT Welcome team creates. And the entire team is always there to help you, supportive, they're approachable, they're highly professional. In fact, as you saw Dr. Mahesh, the grant managers themselves are researchers. They have immense experience, so with postdoc experiences. So your communication is at that level. So you're not talking to someone who does not have research experience. So communication is so professional. They also organize several events and training programs, seminars, basically to help us hone our research skills. So I felt extremely fortunate and lucky to get this fellowship, because it is only helping me to grow step by step. And the team wants you to be a top-notch researcher in your field. That's, I think, the best platform a clinician researcher can ask for. But the important thing as a clinician researcher you need to ask is, if the research question, the research that you are doing, how will it help the society at large in the years to come? So it's not just the fellowship, just this particular project, but overall as a researcher, how you're going to take the field forward. So one thing is perseverance, have confidence in yourself, and I think we must believe that we're all gifted in some way, like Mary Curie says, to achieve the best thing that we need to attain. So I can't thank enough my team members, my students who are in the lab, my mentor, and there are many more people who have actually helped me during my application process to support my application, mentors from other fields who have helped me. So I really thank all of them. So thank you, team, for giving me this opportunity.
Thanks a lot, Shantala. That was again another comprehensive and a very insightful presentation. Thanks a lot for sharing those personal tricks and tips. I'm sure all our attendees would have really benefited and they have made notes. Some of them are asking if we will be sharing the recording session, and you will be receiving that recording in your inboxes. So please keep checking your inboxes. I think you should be getting it by tomorrow. We do have a lot of questions pouring in for all our panelists, but before I jump on to those questions, I'll quickly launch a poll, and we would really want to we would want our participants to cast their vote, as that will help us understand our audience's interest in applying for this fellowship. So the poll is now open. I would request you all to please do cast your vote. Meanwhile, I would request Mahesh and Shah to please turn on your webcams. Thank you. Okay. We will keep ourselves prepared for a lot of applications this time. Thank you everyone for casting your votes. On that note, I'll start with the question and answers round. We have the first question for Shah. How important is preliminary data? What if I'm unable to generate prelim data as I'm making a field switch?
Well, that's already an interesting point. If you're making a field switch, is this the right time to be applying for a fellowship? If you're in that position, it seems to me that you're going to be better off understanding the field, bringing what you bring to it, what the field brings to you, and it may be that this isn't the right time.
There's a subsequent question, Shah. The question is, I have a long career in public health implementation. I've recently started working towards cancer public health research. Is it okay for me to apply if I do not have track record in cancer public health research?
Well, again, it's going to be difficult because what you're trying to do is move from an implementation environment to a research environment where you're coming up with new ideas that are going to lead to implementation in general. And it is difficult to see how in the first years of moving into another field, particularly a field like cancer, which is massive, that you would be in a strong position to put forward a competitive application. So that all sounds a bit damning, but the important thing is, if you have the passion, as Shantala was saying, and if you have the drive, all things are possible. My best advice would be to go for a much less competitive scheme to get a grant to do some of the work that you would like to do, and that would stand you in very good stead for building a career fellowship. And the same point really applies to pilot work, preliminary work. It's good to get the preliminary work done before you apply, because that then deals with the, is this doable? And you will have provided that sort of material to the committee.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, our next question is for Shantala. Shantala, looking back at your experience, can you think of mistakes to avoid while defending the proposal at the interview?
Actually, frankly speaking, my interview experience was really good, so I can't. But yes, they could ask questions related to your sample size calculation, and you just can't say I just discussed with so and so and that's the sample size that I have mentioned. So it's good that you do your homework and say how have you gone about submitting those ideas. Your outcome variables, you could err when you're talking about too many outcome variables. So you need to be clear what the current research says. So that's one point. And if you don't understand a question, you can pause and say, I didn't understand. So you don't have to answer every question and have this fear that if I don't answer, then I fail. It's okay. So you can say, sorry, I did not understand the question, or I'll go back and read. So that's why I said you be honest and you be yourself. If you worry about the outcome, there are chances that you'll make more mistakes. So just go with the fact that I'll do my best, let whatever happen. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question is for Mahesh. Mahesh, this is a scheme related question. So if I'm proposing a field research activity which requires more than 2 support staff, can I request for the same, or do I have to restrict to only 2 support staff as you mentioned?
Yeah, as I already mentioned during my talk, so requests for additional research staff may be considered if the proposed work involves field work, or if the clinical studies require assistance from additional support staff, but such request has to be supported by strong scientific justification.
Okay. Also, another quick question. Do recommendation letters need to be submitted by this deadline of 16th of March?
Yes, all the recommendation letters as well as all the participants on the application need to confirm their participation, and all the letters have to be submitted before the deadline along with the complete application.
Okay, thank you. Next question is again for Shah. How do I decide if my proposal has the right level of ambition? How do I avoid any over ambitious or under ambitious proposal?
Well, it's a judgment call, isn't it? And I think this is where talking with your peers, talking with your supervisor can avoid over ambition. It's important that there is a sufficient amount of work that would actually make a difference to the field. And I think this comes obviously with judgment comes with time and doing research, but I think this is something that you get by interacting with other people, and it's much easier to start with a big idea and hone down onto what is the most important question, the most feasible question, the question that can be answered in the environment in which you are working. So I think it's highly unlikely that you'll come to the right question just inside your own brain, lying in your own bed or at your own desk.
That's right. Thank you. Okay, Shantala, here is another question for you. Do you have clinical duties? How do you manage these duties in parallel to your fellowship research project?
Yeah, I do have clinical duties, and as a clinical neuropsychologist at my institute and as a faculty, I have both clinical plus teaching training responsibilities. So, and some amount of admin. In addition to that, I dedicate time for research. So, yeah, you just need to plan and then perhaps take it up. There are challenges. I'm not saying I don't have challenges. I have faced several challenges, but I'm trying to work on that and take it forward.
Thank you. Mahesh, here is another question for you. Can a clinician who's not associated with any teaching institute apply for the fellowship?
Yes, any researcher who is to undertake high quality research and establish as independent researcher is eligible to apply. So the teaching is like, as I already said during my talk, due consideration is given to periods of non-research career activity. So teaching would be considered as a non-research career activity. So this would be disregarded.
Okay. Another quick question for you, Mahesh. What is the increment policy of India Alliance fellowships, and how are these budgeted in the application?
So generally, the salary scales, I think the applicant or the fellow needs to follow the salary scales recommended by the government of India, like through GST for JRF or SRF, and for research associates. So I think they need to follow the guidelines of the government of India, and also the ones laid out by the host institute.
Okay. Okay. Another very quick question for you. Could you please explain the role of sponsor?
Yes. So sponsor is typically established senior researcher or individual with administrative authority, and who's generally like the head of the institute or the head of the department. So this sponsor should have the administrative authority to sign up to India Alliance grants, conditions, and policies. And also the sponsor must also be in a position to guarantee space and resources at the institute or the department. So basically it can be a person who is the head of the institute or the head of the department or any senior researcher or person with admin authority.
Okay, okay. Thanks, Mahesh. Shah, here is another question for you. Can you share any advice for presenting the background or the literature review? What level of detail will be required?
Yeah, that's a good question. Essentially, you've got to demonstrate that you have covered the field, which is why I highlighted systematic reviews. Now, obviously, systematic reviews are very popular in randomized trial and intervention research. Even animal experiments are now being systematically reviewed. And I think that obviously is one way in which you can bundle a whole lot of background literature that's been assimilated in a rigorous sort of way. So that's one way to go. The other is to not try and cite everything that's been written, but highlight the key papers that are key to your particular research question. Where did this question come from? What is the key source in the literature? And it may be a source that is 20 years old. That doesn't matter. And what you're trying to do is to tell a story. This happened 20 years ago when so-and-so discovered this. Over the last 20 years, we have done this, this, and this. My research fits into this hole that has been a gap in the knowledge, and with filling that gap, these things can now happen. So you're telling a story that actually shows how the research has grown, and from that you should be able to select which are the key parts of that story and which just branches rather than the main trunk of the story.
Thank you. Thanks, Shah. Okay, this is an interesting question. Shantala, any tips or advice for the applicants who may not be very fluent in speaking English?
It doesn't matter. You just need to have basic communication skills and basic knowledge about the language. And I'm sure, with having done your PhD and perhaps reaching the career stage where you are in, I'm sure your English should be good enough. They're not expecting you to be a literary person or a highly accomplished literary person. Yeah. But the key thing is keep your sentences short, simple. The idea is very clear and succinct. I think that's the tips I can give.
Thank you. Shah, this is a question for you. What is meant when it is said that the committee will be looking at the career trajectory? What aspects of the career journey does the committee pay attention to?
Okay. What people are looking at are, when did you start doing research? So if you've done research as a during your bachelor degree, certainly for your PhD. And so we're looking at the trajectory in terms of qualifications, the trajectory in terms of getting grants for research, and obviously the level depends on whether you're an early career, intermediate, or senior. But early career fellowships, it is nice to see that somebody's got small grants for doing bits of research. And then we're looking at the trajectory in terms of publications and in terms of making a difference. So we're looking at various sorts of markers that would show that you are an extraordinary person who has a career trajectory that is what we like to see is a stellar career trajectory that's going up very fast. That's a hallmark of somebody who's going places, who's got drive and ambition. If you've not written a single publication, not even a letter to a medical journal or a biomedical journal, if you've not done any grants, if you've not done any previous research, it comes back to that, is this the right time? And I think you're almost certainly going to be weeded out at the very beginning of the process. So career trajectory, and again, you're telling a story about your life. And when you look at the application, people want to know what drives you, what were the things that pushed you in this particular direction.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Mahesh, here's a quick question for you. If somebody is an early career fellow, can he or she apply for the senior fellowship?
Yes, the eligibility criteria is like up to 15 years of post the qualifying degree. So the candidate, as I already told, if they are eligible and like if the qualifying degree is not, they haven't crossed this limit of this 15 years post MD, MS or MPH, they are eligible. But as I already mentioned, so applicants have to choose the most appropriate scheme suitable for them based on their qualification, research experience, trajectory. And for this, they may also refer to the guidance notes, provisions and the mandates of the scheme, which is available on our website. But the office also sometimes can reserves the right to advise the applicant on the suitability of the scheme accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Shantala, here's another question for you. How much time did you take to write your proposal, and how many rounds of iterations did it take?
As I said, I did not take the vacation that year. So you mark the dates in your calendar and you know that you're going to apply. So at least 2 months before, you spend enough time to think about the clinical population you want to work with. If you're already working on a given research question, just think if you should continue with a research question related to that, so you already have some backup data and some experience. That's one thing. For me, as I said, I had the larger idea in picture and then I had to bring it down. So what I would suggest is keep your full proposal in mind ready. Don't wait until you come to the full proposal stage to sit and write the full proposal. You have the full proposal ready. There are so many sections that you can fill in at the time when you start filling it, but you have the content ready. And as you go on working, you'll require a lot of edits and discussions. And you yourself will question, is this the right question to ask? How do I trim it? And despite all this, in my personal experience, my proposal was a little over ambitious, and I did cut it short the post interview. So the reviewers also understand that you're an enthusiastic person, and they with their experience tell you this is feasible or not feasible. So if your mentors or your supervisors or colleagues can tell you that no, this is not feasible, try this way, I think you should take that in a positive spirit. And so you please keep at least 10 months thorough. And you know when the next stage is going to come. During that time, keep about 10 days dedicated for this without any other distraction. I hope this helps. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. We do have a lot of questions pouring in, but we are running out of time. So I would request our attendees to please send your questions to our inbox, and we'll be responding to those questions in 3 to 4 working days. On that note, I would like to thank once again Shantala and Shah for joining us today. It was an immense pleasure to have you both here for this session, and I would request the audience to please give me some time to make a few quick announcements. The deadline for the call for senior and intermediate fellowship is 1st of March. Like we mentioned before, the call for application for fellowships in clinical and public health research has already been launched on 16th of February, and the deadline is 16th of March, 2 p.m. Indian Standard Time. And we are also in the process of accepting applications for India EMBO lecture courses till 1st of March. So if you would want to host a lecture course, please do apply, and you will find all the relevant details here on our website. And this is the email address wherein you can send in your questions if they haven't been answered during this session. And can we go to the next slide? I swear this is the last announcement. I would request you all to please share your feedback in the feedback form that will come up on your screen as we end the session. And this certainly brings us to an end, and I would like to thank all of you for joining us today, and please do take care and stay safe. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.